Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into something pretty interesting. It's all about those subtle skills, the ones that don't always scream "Look at me," but they can actually lead to some serious earning power.
Yeah, it's kinda like you see those flashy skills out there, the ones everyone immediately notices, but
But it's the stuff underneath, right?
exactly, it's like that hidden expertise that really makes a difference. Like, think about it, you got a sommelier, right? They can identify a wine blindfolded, a concert pianist who can bring a whole audience to tears.
Or a surgeon making like life or death decisions with just a tiny movement of their hand.
Right, it's incredible.
So let's unpack this a bit. What do we even mean when we say subtle skills? I mean, it's got to be more than just being good at something, right?
Oh, absolutely. Think of it like an iceberg, you know?
Okay, I'm listening.
The tip of the iceberg, that's the skill you see. It's impressive, sure, but under the water, there's this massive foundation.
Ah, I see. Like all the knowledge and the experience.
Yep, all the stuff you don't see at first glance. That's what we mean by subtle skills. It's that depth, the years of practice, the intuition, the ability to make these tiny adjustments that end up having a huge impact.
So it's almost like the invisible stuff that makes a skill really, truly exceptional.
Exactly, and that's where that high value comes in. Think about a top negotiator closing a deal everyone thought was impossible.
Or like a software architect. The code they write makes these crazy complex systems work perfectly.
And you know what? A lot of that comes down to those subtle skills, little tweaks that create massive ripple effects.
This is making me think about the medical field. You've got great general practitioners, but then you have those specialists, right?
Yeah.
They often make significantly more. Is it just because they focus on a specific area, or is there more to it?
I'd say it's more than just specialization. It's the mastery of those subtle skills within their area. Think about a surgeon, for instance. They may have spent years developing a unique technique that minimizes risk and leads to better outcomes for their patients.
So it's like they've honed the craft to a level that's just incredibly rare.
Exactly. And that rarity is part of why those skills are so sought after.
Okay, so we've talked about the impact, we've talked about how rare they are, but why else are these subtle skills so valuable?
Well, you got to think, they don't just appear overnight. These skills, they take time, dedication, maybe even a bit of a natural inclination.
It's like aging a fine wine. It gets more valuable over time.
That's a great way to put it. And that scarcity, that's a big part of their value.
This makes me think about those artisans who spend years perfecting their craft.
Oh, yeah.
They pour so much time and energy into creating something truly unique. It's like they're not just making a product, they're bringing this level of detail and mastery that's pretty rare these days.
Exactly. Think of a woodworker who like senses the grain of the wood, and shapes it with this almost intuitive understanding.
Or a chef who just knows how to balance flavors in a way that a recipe could never teach you.
Right. It's the result of years of dedication and honing those subtle skills. It's amazing what they can do.
Okay, so impact, rarity, we've got those down. But here's the big question. In a world where AI is advancing like crazy, are these skills truly future-proof? Can a machine learn this kind of subtle expertise?
That is the million-dollar question. And well, at least for now, the answer is no. I mean, AI is fantastic with data and rules, but
But
but it really struggles with that human element, the nuance, the judgment, the emotional intelligence. Think about a therapist helping someone work through trauma or a leader inspiring their team. That human connection, that understanding is still irreplaceable. And even in those fields where AI is kind of making progress, like finance or law, being able to really understand the data, see the context, and make those judgment calls based on these like subtle cues, that's still a human thing.
so it's almost like, it's not just about being tech-proof, right? It's about having those uniquely human skills that machines, at least for now, just can't replicate.
Right.
But let's be real for a second. You could have all the subtle skills in the world, but if nobody sees them, if nobody recognizes them, does it really matter?
That's a great point. That's where being able to communicate the value of your expertise comes in. You could be the best negotiator out there, but if you can't explain why you're so effective or show off your successes in a way that people understand.
It's like having this secret weapon, but forgetting to tell anyone about it.
Exactly.
So even with subtle skills, there's this element of like self-promotion that's super important. You got to be able to explain the why behind your success, especially in those fields where, the impact might not be immediately obvious.
Yeah, it's about making the invisible visible. Sometimes those most subtle skills, they're the hardest to actually see. And that can lead to them being undervalued.
Oh, for sure. Like think about a master chef creating this like ridiculously complex dish, It looks so simple when they do it, right?
Right.
But then you try it yourself.
And it's like impossible.
Exactly. Or a musician who can make a piece that's like notoriously difficult look easy. It's like it takes so much practice, so much dedication to reach that level where you make it look effortless.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about impact, we've talked about rarity, we've talked about being able to, actually communicate that value. But is it always like a guaranteed path to a bigger paycheck?
Well, that's it. That's where it gets interesting. While subtle skills are super valuable, we got to remember that market demand plays a huge role. Like, you could be the most skilled blacksmith in the world, but if nobody's using horseshoes anymore.
You're probably not going to get rich off of it.
Right. It's not just the overall market either. It's about understanding the specific context. Like a therapist, a brilliant therapist, they might not be able to command those top tier fees in a rural area where mental health care just isn't, readily available.
So the value of a skill, even a subtle one, is always kind of relative to the environment where it's being used.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to that idea of communication. Sometimes, you might even need to educate the market about why your particular set of subtle skills is so valuable. You might have to be like a pioneer, showing people the impact in a way that they haven't seen before.
That's a great point. Like, think about those early web designers.
Oh, yeah.
They had to convince businesses that having a website, like, it was essential. And they were working with these, like, subtle skills that nobody really understood back then, but, they end up changing the world.
Sometimes it's about seeing that need, you know, that unmet need, and then showing people how your specific skill set can fill that gap.
Exactly.
That's a really cool point. It reminds us that even those big revolutionary innovations, they often start as these like subtle, almost invisible shifts, and then gradually people start to see the value.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about why those subtle skills are often the most valuable ones, what makes them worth so much, and even some of the challenges that come with mastering them.
Yeah.
But what does all this mean for our listeners? Like, do we all need to become brain surgeons or concert pianists to be successful?
No, no, not at all. The big takeaway here is that everyone has the potential to develop these subtle skills in their own field. It's about, going beyond just the obvious tasks and figuring out how you can add that unique value, that thing that sets you apart.
So how do we uncover those hidden gems? Where do we even begin?
I'd say it all starts with self-awareness. Take some time to think about your work. What comes naturally to you? What are you really good at? What are those areas where you see an opportunity to, go above and beyond? What would people always seem to compliment you on?
It's like it's like recognizing those moments when you do something that feels almost effortless, but other people, they really struggle with it.
Right.
Maybe it's the way you explain complex things, super clearly, or the way you connect with people, or maybe you're just really good at seeing patterns that other people miss.
Yeah, those are all good signs.
Those could be like signs of a subtle skill in the making, but how do we actually go from recognizing them to developing them? Like how do we actually nurture those skills? We're starting to see these potential subtle skills, right? Maybe we're even like starting to use them in our work a little bit. What's next? How do we take those and actually turn them into, fully developed skills?
It all comes down to deliberate practice. And it's not just about putting in the hours, it's about focusing on those specific areas where you can make those little but significant improvements.
Okay, yeah. So instead of just kind of going through the motions, we got to be really intentional about what we're doing, right? Like the how and the why behind it all. I can definitely see how that would make a big difference over time. But but is it all about solo practice, or are there other ways to like speed up that development?
Oh, getting feedback is huge. Like finding a mentor or even just talking to your peers, getting their perspective on your work, that can be so valuable.
Yeah.
Having someone who can, see things you might not see, point out those blind spots, give you some constructive criticism, that can help you refine your approach in ways that you might not have thought of on your own.
Yep, makes sense.
And don't be afraid to, study the people you admire in your field. Like really look at their work. Try to see those subtle nuances that make it stand out. See what you can learn from how they do things.
Like getting a backstage pass to see like how the masters do it. So it's about practice, getting feedback, and learning from the best, right? But is there also room for like experimentation in this process?
For sure. You got to be willing to, experiment, to push the boundaries a bit. trying new things, getting out of your comfort zone, even making mistakes. It's all part of the learning process. That's how you figure out what works for you, what doesn't, and eventually you develop your own unique style.
This has been such a cool conversation. I mean, we've learned so much about subtle skills, how they're like super valuable, how they can lead to higher pay, and how we can all develop them if we put in the effort. It's pretty inspiring, honestly.
What's really exciting to me is that, it's not even just about the money. It's about finding that real fulfillment in your work, mastering something truly unique and valuable, like becoming an expert, in the truest sense of the word, someone who can do things, see things that other people can't.
Yeah, it's about realizing that true mastery, it often lies in the details. The stuff that's hard to see but makes all the difference. It's about getting so good at what you do that you can achieve results that other people wouldn't even think were possible.
Exactly. And as you go about your day to day, we encourage you to think about your own work. What are those subtle skills that you could be developing? The ones that could increase your value, your impact, your own satisfaction with what you do? What hidden talents are you sitting on just waiting to be discovered?
And remember, the most valuable skills, they're often the hardest to see. They're the ones that can really make a difference. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.